Welcome to the Art of Equine Alchemy. I'm your host, Amber Leidick, horse trainer, healer, and mentor. This is a podcast where practical horsemanship meets personal evolution. Here, we're diving into what it means to truly connect with your horse, yourself, and the world around you. Through conversations with equine professionals, horse owners, and members of our community, we will explore real stories, actionable insights, and tools designed to help you heal and thrive. This isn't just about horses. It's about transforming how you show up in your life. Because when you address what's happening within yourself, everything around you starts to align. Whether you're looking to refine your horsemanship skills, gain clarity on your own path, or create a more meaningful connection in all areas of your life, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hi there. Welcome back to the Art of Equine Alchemy podcast. And this is our special series, Mirror in the Stall. And we are talking to Tracy Goodwin today. Hello, Tracy. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I was saying before that I have seen Tracy talk at a couple live events that I did. And I think there was once where we had the option and it was like round tables and we got to go to different coaches. And I literally just followed her around. It was like, no, I'm obsessed with this. And because I think it resonates with me, it feels very similar to what I do in a completely different way with horses and people. And you sort of do it with the voice. And so, but but I feel like you do it so much more in depth and you're so much more fine-tuned into the specifics of it. So I was so fascinated by it. So thank you. And do you want to share a little bit about what it is you do?
So that's the hardest question of the whole day.
Always.
The answer is I hear voices. And that's literally what I do because, and of course, this is a God-given gift, but a process of over 3 decades of understanding that I literally can tell people how they are being processed in the subconscious of their listener, which means you might think about it like a voice psychic or a voice. I'm a voice intuitive, so I can listen to your voice and tell you all the ways, all the sounds. I can tell you your whole backstory. I can tell you every wound that's in you that's playing out in sound that is actually costing you in the subconscious of your listener, your buyer, why they're not listening, why they're not buying. That's a really that's it in a real broad stroke, but it's really about healing and healing trauma and healing wounds. I call it the psychology of the voice. Everybody has one, but I work with the vehicle of sounds the size of a grain of sand in the voice.
Yeah, I did do a 20-minute call with you, I think, before a live event I did last September. And I believe that the wound that you called out was the well, you could probably do it now. It's probably the same as it was. But it was I'm sorry I exist, I think what it was, where
Mm,
you're trying to prove yourself and your worth
mhm,
and so yeah, and it really resonated with me because in relationship always I was like, how can I be better? People pleaser. Like,
mhm,
what am I doing wrong? Oh no, I can feel your nervous system is off. How can I fix it? And so it really resonated with me and I was like, yep, that's the one. So
mhm.
yeah. Um so you do talk about these core wounds. Do you want to speak to those within the voice, how you work?
Sure. So So I hear 7 layers of sound. And in the top six, and I hear it in everybody, and I hear it instantly. And so I am the best party trick ever because what do you hear in my voice? So I hear these 7 layers of sound. The top 6 layers are actually what I call voice masks. They are sounds that don't represent the truth of who we are. But I also hear our real voice in that seventh layer. So when we think about typical voice coaching, we think about, well, slow down or be louder or warm up. I don't look at voice that way. I hear the top layer sound, and then I want to seek what is behind the sounds. In some of my research, what I uncovered in what I'm hearing is that actually, if we go behind the sound, we hit the wounds. And there's core wounds that are this that everybody has. It's fear of judgment in relation to voice, fear of judgment, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, sense of belonging. And the very, very, very last stop on the sound train for me is your degree of worthiness.
Mhm.
And those wounds are actually created sometimes before, usually before we're 5 years old, and they're created from things that are spoken to us. So, like, I was almost run over by a car when I was 5. Would the car almost hitting me create a trauma? Absolutely. But would the screaming of my mother
Mm.
create a voice story and create an imprint in how I'm going to use my voice and create a wound? Yes. And it's 100% related to voice. So a lot of people will say, well, I've done 13 years of therapy. Well, I've done all the personal development. Great, fantastic. I can hear it. But the body of the voice holds the protection mechanism. So these sounds in our voice are meant to protect these wounds so that and protect us so we don't get wounded again. And we don't want our buyer, our listener, our person to hear our wounds. So this becomes where it becomes about safety.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's so interesting because of the fact that it's all such a subconscious thing. Is it like a somatic thing where like you were, for example, your experience when you were young with your mom and you can attach that traumatic thing with hearing her? Is that something that gets stuck within you, or is it something completely different?
It's different.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Yes and. So the words that are spoken to us, so I figured this out around dialects because in the early years of my career in my 20s, I worked with dialects. I taught actors dialects for movies and I took dialects away from business people. We used to do that 35 years ago. And I thought, why do the Irish sound Irish and I sound Texan? I want to sound Irish. They sound really cool. It was in that work and in that research that I figured out that the information comes in the ears, the subconscious immediately makes a decision about it because the subconscious number one goal is to protect our heart. Our voice is the orchestra of the heart because it represents our identity. So mom says, and it can be something as simple as shh,
Mm.
subconscious. I mean, I could sit here and tell you stories all day about Bill, who couldn't command a presence in his company, went back to his 5 sisters. Bill spoke quiet. So this information comes in, the subconscious, and I'll use Bill as an example. When I met him, he talked about this loud. And I immediately asked him, I said, do you have siblings? And he smiled and he said, I have 6 older sisters. Okay, he loved his sisters, but they were constantly saying, Bill, you're too loud. Bill, get out of our room if you're going to be loud. So that information came in. Bill's subconscious went, don't worry, I've got this, and literally started calling the shots on how the muscles hold how the voice is going to come out. So there's an internal piece and there's an external piece, and they're linked together. So it goes like it can go back to Irish. All I have to do is shift the placement of my face and I can become Irish. We have that in every experience we've ever had. If I talk quiet, if I get a tone, if I have a raw, I mean, just every single sound has a voice story behind it. And that voice story was created from that wound. And that wound comes from that subconscious processing.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually what we're responding to more than even the words sometimes because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. We don't even hear the words until we process and decide if we're accepting of the sound.
right. It's so funny because I have all these questions, but then I'm going straight to my own personal experience, and that's all that my brain can do. Where I I reached out to you not that long ago, and I talk a little bit about my relationship here because it's been probably my personal relationship with a partner has been my biggest struggle. Like me and the horses have always been good, and I talk about mirror and the stall where it's like the things that were reflected back to me from them was probably the stuff I couldn't see that was good in me. It wasn't necessarily hard lessons where some people have hard lessons with them. Where it was hard for me was in relationship. So I learned a lot of different things throughout my horrible relationships. And then now I have this one where we're both really conscious of things and what we're doing, but we don't know what to do about it. And we're both in this state of transition where he's selling his property, doing a bunch of stuff. So we haven't actively done anything about it, but we are like kind of taking notes on the things that bother us about each other. And one is where he's always like, you're yelling. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not
Yeah,
yelling, but I'm
yeah.
not also not being heard. So it was like this
Mhm.
interesting, like, dynamic of us constantly feeling that from each other. And then me saying, well, in my last, all of my relationships, I didn't have a voice and I was people pleasing.
Mhm.
And now I want to be able to say the thing to you, but you're not receiving it. And so I'm like, well, maybe it's something that I am doing. And I equated it to on my own. And you can tell me your feedback around it and if I'm way off or not. But it was like almost like the people pleaser was still in there.
It's still
And
in there.
the people pleaser felt like almost a way to control. And he was
Safe.
sensing the control. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's exactly right. And so the whole thing is about what is going on in us internally and how are they processing it. So this is all day long. People say, well, I'm not yelling. Right, but I hear these nine stories in your voice, and it's like raw negative emotion. Raw negative emotion, we go to, or we go to shut down, or we go to this go-to that is imprinted in the body of the voice. And it has to be, I wish I had a magic wand and I could just go poof, all of it's gone, but it's layers and layers of microscopic sounds, and we don't hear it. This is the crazy thing is, well, you may hear it, but you typically don't hear it, but they process it 100%. I call it the concept of perception versus reception. I think I'm being kind, but I'm actually being really intense
Hmm.
because that's how they're receiving my sound, and all those stories and all those layers of protection are coming out, but I'm not even cognizant to it anymore.
Hmm. So, so is it, I guess it's both ways, right? Like the person perceiving it and hearing it filters through their own lens and their own perception, and then also there's the additional the stuff that's coming out when it's being said. So how do you unwind that?
So, yes, and again, it's really not so much we're reading it through our filters. And
Mhm.
I actually tested this recently. Everything that comes out of my mouth, as you know, has been researched. And I played this little game out in the world with people that I know. And we would, like an example, we would go to a restaurant. And this is the whole concept of the work. I would, I'll give you a perfect example. We were at a restaurant, and I have a lot of trouble with being in the world,
Mhm.
but I had a lot of trouble with the woman that was waiting on us, and she was doing some passive aggressive things, and there were some things that were happening in her voice. And I immediately dissected it. And the woman that I was having dinner with, she couldn't put her finger on it, but when I laid it out for her exactly what I heard, she said, yes, that's absolutely what I'm hearing. We couldn't be more different. So actually, it's not so much our filters that are getting in the way. It's literally how the subconscious processes sound. So I'll give you another example. I was working with someone this morning, and I said, when you say it that way, your audience hears, she doesn't think I'm good enough. And then I plugged in a tactic. I got a different sound. I said, when you say it that way, they hear, wow, she really believes in me.
Mhm.
And it's all in the sound. So it's really about the body of the sound, in the underbelly of what's in the sound, because that story, that motive, all those things are in the sound. Does our own personal filter play into it? It can, but that's not really the predominant thing, because irritation is irritation, or frustration is frustration, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah. So then what do you do about it?
Yeah,
Aside from
well,
call you. I mean,
yeah,
what do you do with your clients? Like, what does that process look like?
well, it everybody's different. I think voices are like a fingerprint, they're like a thumbprint. But it's the process. Now, my ear is the magic. we're taking my ear off the market a little bit, and because it's really the process that makes the shift, and it's the process that I've created over the years. Sure, I can instantly identify what the problems are and why they're not hearing you, and I'll instantly find the story, but it all starts internally. It starts, I call pillar one, unearthing. And there's about 3 to 5 things that I look at when I go to unearthing. The first one is I want to find the stories. Now, it's fast with me because I can hear, and I'm not tuned in all the time. I had to train myself not to be tuned in all the time. But I'll hear something and I'll ask a question like, do you think that we're not going to believe you? I already know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to double verify the sound because I don't like to waste time. So and you'll go, oh my gosh, yes, how did you know that? And so we first find that story. So we identify, well, what are the issues? Like, well, I don't feel heard. And just like what you were telling me a minute ago, I don't feel heard. And then he says, I'm yelling. Okay, let's dissect that sound. And then we've got to find the stories that are behind it. That's the first thing I do. And in that process of finding the stories, we find the wounds. I don't think it has to be a big deep dive 10-year
Mm-hmm.
therapy thing. I think if you want to do that, that's great. But we're just still playing out the old stories.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. All right, well, hold on a minute. I'm listening. I want to hear it. So nobody wants to hear it. So we dismantle those stories and then we do a little bit of subconscious reprogramming to create the new story. Not a big process, but finding the stories, rewriting them is the first step. There's other things that I look at in pillar one, like character traits. Character traits can massively play into sound. We don't want to take the character trait away, but we want to take the sound away. An example is outcome driven, no nonsense. Outcome driven, I'm talking to you now like from my outcome driven, no nonsense. You could potentially be processing that as, gosh, what's her problem?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that sound is actually typically processed as, I'm not good enough to be around her.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to take the trait away, but we want to take the sound in the body of the voice away.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting
Typical,
because that is what when I'm talking with my partner, and a very a masculine thing, right? Like, here's what I'm dealing with, like, like,
yeah,
and I'm like, oh God, my worthiness. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's what it really all boils down to.
Mm-hmm.
There was somebody I worked with a couple of years ago, and she was funny. She said, you didn't mention all this worth stuff in the marketing materials. And I was like, I know, would you have come? And she was like, yeah, I totally would have come. But that's what we have to reframe. And we think we've done the work because, or many of the people, most of the people, I'm not getting non-self-developers coming and going, well, what do you hear in my voice? People know there's something else. And so those stories, the work has been done, but not in relation to the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so important is what was spoken, how did it affect you, what is the story that was created, and then what is the sound that's coming off of it. So the first whole part is an internal part. I did answer, I mean, I ask a lot of questions, I identify a lot of sounds, we rewrite a lot of stories, we reframe through tactics. Then I move to pillar two, which is the actual sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual sounds are what I call voice masks. So you've mentioned people pleaser. That's going to have some very specific sounds. So before I ever even ask you if you're a people pleaser, I'm going to have identified those sounds, which is why I'm asking the question, because I
Right.
want to hear, do you think you are or no?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've identified about 17 voice masks now, and we start looking at those sounds. Are you talking in a high pitched voice, like a nice girl? And so we've got to maybe still identify a story around that sound. It's very much like a rubber band ball. It's kind of hard to separate, but that's where I start applying tactics. And it depends. I have a whole buffet of tactics, but it a lot of times depends on the sound. If I'm dealing with a people pleaser mask, one of the first things I'm going to look at is, why are you trying to convince me?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what a people pleaser, that's part of that family of sounds, is the people pleaser is going to say it this way and say it this way and say it this way and say it this way, thinking if they say enough words,
Mm-hmm.
surely they're going to get it, surely they're going to hear it. and they won't. So a tactic there would be, what is the bottom line of what you're trying to tell me? That I hate it when you don't do what I ask you to do. Great. That's our new tactic. And those things are very, very hard because that wound is linked to it. It's like, well, and a lot of times we don't remember it. But when you were 3 and you asked for something and it flipped mom out, subconscious went into action right then. So the first trade we make is before we're 3, we trade our fullest expression for safety. I can't be thrown out of this family, so I won't be so loud anymore. So pillars 1 and pillar 2 are all about pulling the layers away. I'm not really giving you things like slow down, speak louder. I'm taking away all the noise. Then we get to pillar 3, and that's where I really get to dive into all the sounds that you're not playing that are in that 7th layer. They can't get out now because they're buried down, because I've got to prove, and I've got to this, and I've got to that. When we can pull some of that stuff away, then all those sounds come out. And that's where you can really start to fully express what you're feeling, fully express who you are. And we live in a world where we've been taught, whatever you do, don't be yourself. If you want to get anywhere, don't be yourself. We don't like it when you are you. So stop. Well, now we're pulling all the layers away because that was bad advice.
Right.
That was the wrong message.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating because that is so true in the sense that I feel like for me, it's like, how many years have I been on this journey? Have I
Mhm.
worked with so many coaches and so many different modalities? And I'm like, all right, this is where I know the people pleaser. And at 3, I lost my dad, and I was the only one
Mhm.
there.
That's
And my
huge.
mom was young. And so it was on a dock. He had a seizure, and they were all at the campground. So when they came back, they found him. And what had happened was, I don't think anyone really acknowledged that maybe it was impactful for me because my mom was young and then she had to work full time. She had to go to school full time. So it was really a lot of, you need to be good so that your mom's doing so much for you. And so I became, that caretaker-ish role for her, not consciously, but so I'm like, okay, I know
Yeah.
that. I know that. I know where that came from. Like, I'm like, get it out. Get it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge. And I see stories like that all the time. And we get this imprint that relates to our voice.
Hmm.
When we start talking about these things, a lot of times people will remember something that they had forgotten.
Hmm.
Why are we struggling to play bigger? Why are you struggling to show up? Oh my gosh, I remember when I was 3 and my mom took me out of the carriage and she said, "Why are you so much all the time?"
Hmm.
And the brain went, "Well, we're not doing that anymore."
Hmm.
And now here she is, 40, trying to show up on video, and it isn't working because
Hmm.
that's playing in the background. And so stories like yours are I think they're all big,
Hmm.
but we don't really think about them in relation to voice.
Hmm.
But they are, because there was something that happened in your brain in that moment that said it's not safe to stand in authority, or it's not safe to ask for what you want, or it's not safe. People pleaser is probably 8 out of 10 of the people I deal with. And the data is a little bit skewed because is it that 8 out of 10 people in the world are people pleasers? I think there's a good chance there is. Or is it the people pleasers that are struggling to use their voice and they come
Right.
and work with me? But it's huge. I mean, because think about it. It's all built when we're infants and small children. Our entire society is built for us to conform.
Hmm.
And so we just do. And then we lock it in the muscle memory by doing the same habit over and over and over and over, whatever that voice habit is. And we get to the point where we don't remember the story. Sometimes we don't even we remember all the layers of the story, and we don't really even think about voice as being impactful. I think this is, and maybe I'm biased, but I think this is where the internal freedom lies,
Mm.
because I was tortured to not be able to. I was raised in silence.
Mhm.
So had an internal torture when I would try to use my voice.
Mhm.
And so many of the people I work with, it's like they have a governor on their body, like an old school bus, where logically they go, yeah, you know what, I'm going to come in there and I'm going to tell him. And then they get in there and they go, yeah, that's okay. That would be fine.
Mhm.
Because their body literally will not allow it because the story has not been rewritten to make it safe. So the
Mhm.
body is the body, and the body of the voice is just responding.
Mhm. Yeah, and for you, I know you shared your story at the event, but would you be willing to share a little bit here about how you got to this? I mean, I feel like the things that we go through shape who we are and the work we do in the world, and yours was
Yeah.
such a such a interesting, but like, holy shit,
Yeah.
of course, right?
Yeah.
So, would you
Yeah.
mind sharing that story?
Sure. So some of it is violent. Some of it, I'll give the warning that some of it is bad, but I was not raised with mean people. I was the fourth. And many people over the years now have said you were too much from the minute you came out of clearly my ability to hear is a frequency.
Mm-mm.
And I know that my siblings and my parents, I was just different.
Mhm.
And I was big and I was larger than life. And I was immediately silenced. My siblings were not, but I was not allowed to speak. And if I was, it had to all be positive. I was never allowed to say the word no. And under any circumstances was I allowed to express emotion. So I became an actor. I was actually an actor and an award-winning speaker by the time I was 16 because that got me a platform to be heard.
Mhm.
And I went to college I thought everybody could hear voices the way that I hear them. I thought everybody could hear 7 layers of sound, so I didn't think anything of it. And I went to college to be an actor because I wanted to be an actor, and I was an actor. I made my living doing television commercials, but I was cast in a play and I was severely beaten in that play because of the actor. There was like a slap scene in the play, but the actor was literally hitting me. I had my nose broken, and because I couldn't say no to the director.
Right.
And as a result of that, I went to a different college and I got to work with one of the greatest voice masters of our time, Arthur Lesack, which really probably planted the foundation of what was to come. And by this time, I'm already getting requests to coach voices, and this is Yellow Pages days. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I will do anything but coach voices because I felt like an imposter.
Mm.
Who's going to hire a voice coach that got beat up in a play because she couldn't say no, because she couldn't use her voice?
Mhm.
But people kept finding me, and I was trying to run from being a voice coach, and I was acting and I was directing plays all over the world, and people kept finding me, like major corporation C-suites come work with our C-suite executives. And so I finally got it one day that, oh, okay, I guess
Mm.
this is what I'm supposed to do. And when I did, I went all in, and I immediately started researching. And in the early years, I taught typical voice coaching because I thought, I can't do what I do now. Are you kidding? People think I'm crazy. And I literally did almost lose my mind because I could hear layers of sound. But I would go, yeah, well, you know what? I think if you practice more, we're going to be good. And I could hear the problem, but I was the ultimate. I was the quintessential people pleaser. I wasn't about to tell somebody what I will tell them today. So I quit coaching voices and I became a furniture refinisher, and the phone
Oh
rang
my
off the
God.
hook. Yeah. The phone is, I don't know if you've heard this part. This is the best part of the story, I think. The phone is ringing off the hook. And I'm like, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not coaching any voices. I run a furniture refinishing business now. My super of my building, I lived in New York City. I had been teaching for Mike Nichols. He would drag the pieces in, and all day long, I would listen to that phone ring and I would sand away the layers of paint and varnish to get to the original beauty of every single piece we sold. And one day I heard this voice in my head that said, what are you doing?
Mhm.
You are not on earth to finish furniture. And in that moment, I said, okay, I'll come back. But now that's what I do with voices. I
Mhm.
sand away the layers. And I came back, I made a commitment. I said, okay, if I go back, I've got to do it my way. And I've just got to be considered crazy. And
Mhm.
within 24 hours, I knew the name of what I was creating was psychology of the voice. I knew it was all about the brain and the subconscious and our psychology of our life. and the rest is history.
Mhm.
That's 30 years ago. And I've done, I don't even know how many research studies now. And it's really been the most extraordinary life that I could have ever imagined. So that just goes to show if you have a feeling you're supposed to do something, but you feel like an imposter, that may be the very thing you're supposed to do. Because this was clearly the very thing I was supposed to do. And in that silence, I learned to navigate silence. I learned to navigate what's coming and how do I navigate it to stay the safest.
Mhm. Yeah, it's once I heard you speak at that event, I was just like, how come no one talks about this? And I
Nobody talks about it this
yeah,
way.
you were the only
Nobody.
person that I have ever,
Yeah.
and I've like gone down some rabbit holes in all kinds of
Yeah.
different places, but you are the only one that I'd ever heard talk about it. And it makes so much sense because if you think about the voice and how it's vibration and how energy,
Hmm.
how you feel is vibration.
Hmm.
And I talk a lot about with the horses, like they'll specifically say, well, there's specific body language and cues that you use. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you can have all of that right, but if you don't feel worthy of asking what you're asking, then the response you're getting mirrored back to you is that. So it's
Hmm.
almost like the voice does that same thing, which is why I was so like, does anybody know how
Yeah.
crazy and great this is? So,
Yeah. Well, and you're exactly right. And so it's like, let's go back to people pleaser for a minute. So let's say you are confident and you are an authority in your space, but that is running and calling the shots. You're not going to come into a space and go, all right, this is what we're going to do.
mhm,
You're going to come into the space and go, okay, hey, welcome everybody. Okay. They don't know the backstory. And
mhm,
so they're going to make this decision. Is she really the authority when you are?
mhm,
And so it is literally that sound that's coming out that they're going to decide on, and they're going to mirror. I call it vocal foreshadowing. They're going to give you back what they think they hear.
mhm,
Oh, well, we're not interested. This is how I figured out voice masks. The guy was trying to prove he knew everything and he couldn't close deals. And I
mhm,
said, yeah, because they're hearing you having to be the big deal. And they're going, yeah, well, we're not going to be a part of this and we want to collaborate. So it's literally, it's all vibration. It's all energy. This is why things like passive aggressive and the silent treatment make me absolutely crazy. And I understand why somebody that shuts down does it because of all this wound stuff we're talking about. But what do you expect is going to happen when I go, no, that's fine. Mhm. That's fine.
mhm.
I mean, I've just sent a million messages. My words say I'm fine. But my voice says, you have no idea how mad I am at you, but I'm never going to tell you.
Mhm,
And it's because we're not taught this stuff, you know?
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll say, and I had that experience actually because I feel really confident in what I do.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's really easy for me to be in a session with someone and I also just had this conversation with my business partner slash friend where I was like, well, I'm just going to go on for the workshop coming up and I'm going to do what happens where I just open up channel and it comes out,
Hmm.
like wherever it comes from. But I had the lived experience at the event where I know that I'm called to do it. And I know I was pushing through things that were uncomfortable and it was successful. But there was moments when I was the announcer and everybody was scattered everywhere. And I felt like I was a kindergartner teacher where I was
Yeah.
these empty. And at one point I was like, did the thing that kindergartner teachers do and it got everyone's attention. But I was like, what is happening right now? And I was like, and then all that I could think of was back when we had that call. And I was like, shit, I should have done more. But it was
Yeah.
there's this gap where I'm like, but something is missing. And I know that it's what it is, which is why I was
Yeah.
like, definitely going to work with you. But why also I knew it was so important for people to understand this piece
Yeah.
because it is.
Well, and I don't, yeah, nobody talks about it. Like I've scoured the earth and I think that there are other voice intuitives,
Mhm.
but they're not using it like this. They've not turned it into their body of work and done the research around it. But I like to think of this work as it's not like there might be remedial, might be a good word to people that really have no confidence and I've got to really build. That's not what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this work is about you're great. How do I make you better?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make it where you can make more impact or make more sales or have more internal freedom or be able to manage conflict like it's another conversation and you've struggled with it your whole life. For me, it's about the next level. What does that next level look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so much more empowering for people to be like, oh, I'm not lacking. There's not something wrong. There's just more of me that I have not tapped into yet.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's just a better there's so much that's not unpacked. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even when I use people's real voice to help me move away the layers. That's one of the ways I do it so fast is I'll have somebody do a role play and I'll go, no, they're defensive on that. And I hear the other layer and that becomes the North Star. And when we can bring that fullest expression out, and that's really, I think, what authenticity is. It's all those sounds that we're afraid to reveal because what if they don't like that? Or what if they're going to judge? Or what if they think we're stupid? Or what if, there's so much noise around the voice that we pick up from the world.
Mm-hmm.
Read the room, decide what people are thinking, change who you are. We got to take all that away. I take all that away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so great. I'm paying attention to the time and I want to be respectful of your time, but I also really want to hear the story that you were talking about from Sedona and your
Oh my
book.
gosh, it was wild.
So I can't
It was
let
wild.
that get passed by and run out of time and not hear it.
Okay. So it's out there. And I'd never been. And, James talks about sometimes you might not sleep, you can have all these experiences. So I'm a half-breed Choctaw Indian. My father was a Choctaw Indian. My great-grandmother was a medicine woman. And I navigate the whole world through sound. So I got there at night and so I couldn't see anything. I mean, I couldn't see the red rocks or anything. And I immediately started crying, which I was kind of prepared for. I thought, I think I'm going to cry this whole week. And so I'll give you the horse part first, and then if you want to hear more, I can share more. But I was staying at an Airbnb and I couldn't really see anything. It was pitch black. They have that light where you can't have bright light at night. So I went to sleep and I got up the next morning and I walked to the front of the room. The front room had a big window seat and the whole wall was a window. And it overlooked this extraordinary red rock. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to sit right here in this window seat and I'm going to do my writing, my morning writing and reading and things that I do. And I sat down and I started doing it. And I felt a presence. And I have felt my father's presence many times in the form of an angel. And I looked up on those red rocks, and as real as it could be, there were 3 horses with 3 Native Americans on them. And one of them was my brother, and one of them was my father, and one of them was my great grandmother. And she was riding my horse from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere I went, I could feel them come in, and they were constantly on top of those rocks watching over me. And it was, I mean, I have experienced my father for 6 months after he died came with a posse of angels and they would follow me around every night when I would walk the dog for 6 months. And then I never saw them again. But it was kind of mind bending, really. And then there were a lot of animal encounters there that were what those animal encounters solidified is everything I had been unsure of, every thought that I had been unsure of, like maybe I need to have more fun. That animal would show up.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this confirmation of about 9 things that I had been sitting on that I'd been looking for answers, which I kind of expected to get, but I did not expect the 3 horses
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah, that's so wild.
It was wild. And it
Yeah.
was as real as we're sitting here right now. Like I had to go that kind of thing because I could literally see them.
Yeah. Yeah. Sedona is something completely different. We're going in May,
Hmm.
to the Airbnb, and I've gone twice before, and there's so many things that happen there.
So wild,
Yeah.
right?
hmm Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to connect back with the land there and
Hmm.
see. But um, what do I want to end with? I don't want to end.
Yeah.
I want to have many sessions. I know for 100% that he's actually showing his property right now. And he's like, I swear when this sells, we're going to do all the things. I'm like, okay, but first is Tracy. And he was actually him who was the one that wanted to work with you, which
Oh,
is ironic
wow.
because he was in, it was Arizona, I think, the last conference that you were at that I followed you.
Yeah. Yeah. The next
And he,
level.
yeah, and he was staying in the hotel with me, but he was visiting friends and stuff.
Oh,
And he came in, I was like, not yet, I'm not done. And I went on and on about you. So he's like, well, why
oh,
don't we,
good.
since it's my
Yeah.
tone and it's your tone, why don't we work with her? And I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
It's all the unspoken. And I get asked to do relationship stuff a lot.
mhm,
I can do it for sure, but I've not really made it a focus.
right.
I've more worked with sales teams and entrepreneurs, but it's a huge piece of relationship, not just relationships like yours, but I worked with a guy one time. He came to me to help with his business, totally changed his relationship with his adult daughter
hmm
because of what she was hearing in his voice, because of the way he was altering to try to not upset her.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, I have an adult child that we're a little bit on the struggle bus right now, and we're definitely in therapy, but it's getting
Mhm.
better. But I'm wondering, like, and I think back to, and then my little one who's 11 and he's
Mhm.
wild.
Mhm.
And I think about how many times I'm like overwhelmed and it's my own stuff where I'm like, oh my, can you just like take it down a notch? And I'm like, oh God. And I hear myself say stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm destroying you.
Well, I always get tell parents, once you hear me talk, don't freak out. Don't panic. But because a lot of times they do, it's like, oh my gosh, I've totally screwed up my children.
Right,
And you can't look at it that way.
right.
But I think sometimes people don't even recognize how much the voice holds.
hmm
I mean, it's how we identify ourselves in the world. It's how science has proven that in under 30 seconds, the human brain decides 36 things about someone based on sound.
hmm
Now, I don't have to know anything about you, but I just listen to you for 30 seconds and I can tell you 36 things.
hmm
And I can identify those things, but everybody is processing it subconsciously
Right.
and making decisions. So it's a very, very powerful instrument for sure.
hmm Yeah, and it's something that you use literally every day.
Every day.
And I wonder too, does that also connect with, I know the sound of the voice, but your voice as in like the message that you're portraying, even if it's in written form, like, right? It's like the same thing. You're not making the sound, but still the
Uh-huh.
energy, the vibration of it going onto paper or onto your computer or whatever.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with a lawyer one time and he had a people pleaser mask. And I figured it out in the writing because the writing he'd be talking and articulating, and then he would go, well, like, maybe I think maybe we could, and he was buffering bad news every single time. Well, what does a people pleaser classically do? I don't call it filler words, I call it buffer. They
hmm
buffer the bad news because they're not sure how it's going to land.
hmm
And there it was in writing. So it took me a while to study that. People used to ask me all the time, is it the same? And I would say, I don't know. I don't think so. But then I got around to researching it and studying it. 100% it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like the writing is just your voice on paper.
Totally. Totally.
So the same things are going to
Yeah.
come out.
Yeah. Yeah. So like a people pleaser is going to type it out and then erase it all and then
Mhm.
type it again and then erase it all potentially. That could be an option that they do. And that in a voice form is, I'm just not going to say anything because I don't really know how to say it. So I
Mhm.
just won't say anything because I don't want to rock the boat.
Mhm.
And to me, that's torture.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like because we're basically put on this planet, I feel like we choose this human meat suit to
Yeah.
come and do
Yeah.
what we're here to learn, right? And communication and voice is like the thing that we use most often and the most
Right.
overlooked, which I'm like, wait,
I
wait.
know, I know,
It's
I
so wild.
know.
Yeah.
And when they teach it in schools, they teach it like typical voice coaching, where we immediately go to, oh yeah, well, yeah, you don't sound good. So what we're gonna need to do is pile on these 52 things, so make you better. I
Mhm.
don't see it that way. I believe everybody was born with the most perfect voice, and it
Mhm.
just got buried a little bit, and we just have to uncover it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. So now you're going to have a bunch of people that want to work with you that are going to be a horse person. And
Well,
I
well,
need
we'll form a group. We'll put together a group, the
to,
Amber Group.
oh, yeah, it would be fun to be able to do like a workshop or something with you
Yeah.
because I totally fangirl over you constantly and I'm always thinking about you. I'm like, there's a lot of people that I've talked to and I pride myself in the fact that I have no problem reaching out to literally anybody, any of the trainers in our industry, people are like,
Yeah.
"Oh," and I'm like, I don't care, whatever, they're just people. And I'm like, but I'm so excited to talk to Tracy. And also I feel like she's gonna see inside my soul in our conversation. And I feel very naked and nervous.
Yeah. Well, I think that everybody's like that. But when I'm on a call like this, I would literally have to stop and shift gears. I
Mm.
used to just be tuned in all the time, and it got to where there were certain sounds that would make me run really high fever.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, like severe anger and intense yelling, certain forms of loud, and then I would be down with 104, 105 fever for days. So
Hmm.
I had a coach, I always have 19 coaches propping me up, and
Hmm.
I had to learn how to turn it off. It's not that I'm not aware of it, but I'm not tuned into it.
Yeah.
And then I flip it and then I tune in. And then it is, many people have said, I've never felt so seen because I can see your soul through the
Hmm.
sound.
Hmm.
And it's funny because we go, I want to be seen. I want to be heard. This comes up all the time. And 3 weeks in, what do I do? What do I do? They're hearing me. They're seeing me. What am I supposed to do with this,
Now
Tracy?
what do I do?
Yeah, totally. And we're not comfortable being seen, even though we desperately want to be seen. We're
Mm-hmm.
not comfortable being heard, even though we desperately want to be heard. So we have to learn to navigate that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, because then once you get to that place, then it's like, well, no, there's a whole nother like layer of learning where you're like, and now how do I manage this? And I feel
Totally.
when you talk about not being tuned in all the time, I think for the people out there that are really sensitive in
Hmm.
whatever way that you are sensitive, I feel like everyone has their gifts. Um, and I feel like there's a part of me that rejects being an empath, or like
Oh, yeah.
oh, where I'm like, well, I'm not going to be that um affected by people. I'm not going to let that happen to me. When I'm my business partner, Shaylee, we actually want you on that podcast too. She's very sensitive to that stuff. She's an animal communicator and also
Yeah.
really tapped into basically everything. And so we'll do certain things, we'll do retreats and we'll do certain stuff where she's like, that made me so sick last time. And I need to be better
Yeah.
about like when I open up my energy to other people and so there's part of me that knows that what I do and why I say that shuts me off to like a way, it's like a protective mechanism where I'm like, I really want to
Yeah.
be more tapped in. And I know, and there's moments when I'm in sessions that I do go there, but then there's something that's like, but also not interested.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, if I can tap into that, then I can be more of like who I am and what I need to be doing, and also know how to have discernment and
Yeah.
myself and be in that.
Yeah.
That's like this phase where I'm in where I'm like, ah, no, no, thank you. That looks
Yeah.
horrible. But then also
Yeah.
I'm like, there's this deeper calling where you're like, there's so much more. Why aren't you stepping into that? I'm like, the horses tell me all the time. They're like, yep,
Yeah.
you're right there. So go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a deeper calling for sure. I mean, I used to be very selective about, well, I'm only going to work with women because men are scary. And, in the early years of the career, and that was the opportunity,
Mhm.
was for me to work with all types of people, people that would reject the concept, people that, now I pick who I have a group of people that I love to work with, a type of person that I love to work with. But I think there's opportunity. It's about our own healing. But I think that being able to read energy like that, it's 100% a kryptonite.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Yeah.
either going to be amazing or it's going to be a disaster. And we really have to learn to work with it
Mhm.
because it can be a lot. It's harder for me as a participant in something when I go, and I'm fine now and have been for years when I'm a guest in something or I'm teaching or I'm listening. But now when I go to 3-day events, I have to really watch it
Mm-hmm.
where I'm just taking on so much information
Mm-hmm.
that I hit a threshold pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is something that when you talk, I can feel the truth in it for me, where I'm like, I don't know if I want that. And but the other half of me
Mm-hmm.
is like, you want that. And like the other half of me is like, no,
Yeah.
I don't know. I had done a meditation. We had an online thing that her and I did in January. And it was so interesting because I'm diving more into the energetic side of things. Like with the James stuff, like I have all the technical stuff. Like I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
I know how to do all the things, but also I'm like, that's not the problem for me. The challenged space for me is like the energetic side. And I was reading this book and it was talking about, well, your clients are going to mirror you. Like, and
Mhm.
and what are you doing that you would wish that your ideal client would do? And I'm like, I have so many clients that I love, like these people all in here, love all of them because they're all so committed to the work, right? And they're all
Yeah,
and and I love that. And I'm like, I found myself in January, just January was a long month. I found
it
myself like
was.
facilitating this, this program, and then we were gonna have a live call, and I was like, I'm not doing any of the things, and so I was like, well, I'm gonna go through each module. I'm gonna do the program again. And I done a meditation and I had a dog that transitioned who definitely had soul contracts. There was definitely so much learning around people pleasing. She took on a lot of stuff for me and I think actually kept me from getting breast cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
because going into like the body and where it absorbs in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And she came into the meditation and was like, you're so much more than what you're doing. What's wrong? And I was like, I'm scared. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
scared of that. I don't want to get sick. I want to be here a long time. I want to be able to go in the world and live
Yeah,
halfway in and halfway out. But like, like I said, there's that deeper part that's like, you must do this or you're going to be living in this state of like discomfort because you're not doing it all the way. And so I think part of why I even created this program that everyone's in right now is like, it's what I want to do. So I'm like on the journey with everyone where I'm like the
yeah.
integration and the embodiment piece is like the hardest piece for me, well, for everyone, I think, where
Mm-hmm.
you know all the things and you're like, "Ugh, now I have to do the things."
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, it's fun
yeah,
to have a lot of different support and mentors and coaches that are doing so many different things, and which I also want to do when I bring these conversations where I'm like, there's so many different options. There's so many different ways you can
yeah,
get in and like peel back the layers. I'm like, but Tracy's
yeah.
the one that's gonna do this for you, so you need to meet her. So fun. So, is there anything left that you have a burning desire to share that you want to get out that hasn't really come out?
No, I can't think of anything. I mean, I think that this has been a good showcase of for a concept that I think it's the most crucial piece
Mm-hmm.
that people are not even thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every decision about us is made by our voice.
Mm-hmm.
Every reflection of who we are and who we aren't happens in the voice. And the wounds are going to come out. And
Mm-hmm.
life on the other side of those wounds is really where it's at. Because,
Mm-hmm.
and what you just said about there's something bigger, I think there's something bigger for everybody
Mm-hmm.
because I can hear it in that seventh layer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the work. I think that's the mission
Mm-hmm.
is how do we get you there where you can really play full out and serve your purpose well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for this. I am 100% going to work with you and definitely because you already said you would, my partner.
Yeah.
Because we already roped her in, I got it in writing. So I'll definitely be taking everyone along on the journey with
Yeah.
me. I'm very transparent in my process. I'm like, yeah, I'm facilitating, but also very much a human right now. So welcome
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
journey. Um,
Yeah.
if people want to find you or work with you or find any of
Yeah.
your programs, where do they do that?
I am Captivate the Room everywhere. CaptivateTheRoom.com, Captivate the Room on Instagram. Tracy Goodwin, I am on LinkedIn, but if you look up Tracy Goodwin, Google or anywhere else, she's a romance novel writer, and
Oh,
that's not me. So, so I'm
got
Captivate the Room everywhere. Definitely
it.
follow me, keep up. I have a Captivate the Room podcast and fairly active on social media. And then if you want information about free things that are coming up or anything, just go to captivatetheroom.com.
Yeah. Yeah. And to anyone listening, the replay or this, I'll put all the stuff in the show notes for you guys, but you should 100% take advantage of any of the freebies she has because they are super potent. And yeah, I'm so if there's any questions, thank you so much. Something I never considered. I know, right? Never considered, which is
Yeah.
why when I
Yeah. Not
first
thinking
heard you
about it.
talk, I was like, what is this that we're talking about right now? And how how across the board, like I said, no matter what language you're speaking and like no matter from the moment you're born and you're like babbling like sounds like that is the thing that is happening. And so yeah, it
Yeah.
needs to be you need to be out
Yeah.
in the world in all the ways.
Yeah.
I love that. So
Yeah.
thank you for hanging
Oh,
out.
you're welcome. Thanks for bringing me in. It was great. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be sure to let you know when this is
Yeah.
public and you can have it and use it and do all the things. So
Oh, awesome.
I look forward to working with you.
Yeah.
Sure. And then
Yeah.
everyone can listen to this podcast and then hear the difference in my voice.
There you go. There you go. There you
All
go.
right. Thank
All
you.
right. You're welcome. Thank
All
you
right.
for having me.
Yep.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.